This is a true horror story. For the full experience, put on your headphones. Look, I'm not doing this for views. Honestly, I debated even hitting record because half of you are going to think I'm off my meds and the other half are just going to call it creepypasta. I wish it was. I really do. Because if it's a story, then I can just close the laptop and it's over. But I still can't sleep through the night without checking the locks every 20 minutes. So here we are. I live in a small town about 40 minutes outside of Asheville, North Carolina, right on the edge of the Appalachian Trail. It's one of those places where the woods don't just surround you, they feel like they're waiting for you to mess up. I've lived here my whole life. I know the sounds. I know what a bobcat sounds like when it's screaming, which, if you don't know, sounds exactly like a woman being murdered. I'm used to that. This was something else. This started back in October. I have this routine, right? I work remote, data entry, boring stuff. And to keep from losing my mind, I take a 3-mile hike every day at 4 p.m. Same trail. It starts right behind my property line and loops around a dry creek bed. I've done this walk maybe 1,000 times. I could do it blindfolded. The first thing that happened was just small. Weird, but small. I was about a mile in, near this old collapsed stone chimney that used to be part of a homestead in the 1920s. I'm walking, listening to a podcast, just some true crime stuff, ironically, and I realize the woods have gone completely silent. And I don't mean quiet, I mean dead. No cicadas, no squirrels hitting the leaves, nothing. It felt like the air got thick, like right before a massive thunderstorm where the pressure just drops and your ears pop. I stopped and took my earbuds out. I stood there for maybe a minute, just listening, and then I heard it. Clack, clack, clack. It sounded like someone taking 2 heavy river stones and hitting them together. It was rhythmic, steady. It wasn't coming from the brush, though. It sounded like it was coming from up. I looked into the canopy of the oaks, but it's October, so the leaves are still thick and orange. I couldn't see anything. I figured maybe it was a woodpecker with a weird rhythm or something. I put my earbuds back in and kept going. When I got home, I went to my back porch to kick the mud off my boots. My dog, Silas, he's a 90-pound Great Pyrenees mix, basically a polar bear with a heartbeat. He was standing at the screen door. He didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. He was just staring. His hackles were up, that ridge of hair on his back standing straight up, and he was making this low, vibrating sound in his chest. Not a growl, more like a hum. "Silas, what is it? Bear?" I asked. He didn't look at me. He was staring past me, toward the tree line. I turned around. The sun was setting, hitting the trees at that angle where everything looks gold and hazy. I didn't see anything. No movement, no eye shine, but I got this sudden, overwhelming smell of wet copper, like if you held a handful of old pennies in a rainstorm. It was so sharp I could taste it in the back of my throat. I dragged Silas inside and locked the door. I told myself I was just dehydrated. The next day, it got weirder. I'm sitting at my desk, middle of the afternoon. My office window faces the woods. I'm typing away when I see something move in the periphery. I look up. About 50 yards out, near the edge of my mowed grass, there's a man. He's wearing a bright yellow rain slicker, which is weird because it's a clear blue sky day. No rain in the forecast for a week. He's just standing there, facing away from the house, looking into the trees. I got up and went to the window. "Hey!" I yelled, though the glass was shut. He didn't move. I grabbed my phone and stepped out onto the porch. "Hey, buddy, you lost?" The guy starts walking, but he's not walking like a person. He's taking these incredibly long, slow strides. His knees are coming up way too high, almost to his chest, like he's marching in slow motion through deep water. He didn't turn around. He just marched right into the thicket and vanished. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. I called the non-emergency line. I told the dispatcher some guy in a yellow coat was trespassing. She said she'd send a deputy when one was free, but it's a small county. About an hour later, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. I looked out the window. The yellow rain slicker was hanging from a branch. Not the man, just the coat. It was draped over a high limb of a pine tree, maybe 12 feet off the ground. It was swaying back and forth, even though there wasn't a lick of wind. I went outside, stupid, I know, with my hand on the grip of my Glock, just in case. I got to the base of the tree. I looked up. The coat was brand new. No dirt, no tears, but as I'm looking at it, I noticed something on the ground. It was a pile of river stones, stacked in a perfect, neat little pyramid. And then I heard it, from deep in the woods, maybe 100 yards off. "Hey, buddy, you lost?" It was my voice, exactly my voice, the same pitch, the same inflection, the same slight rasp I get when I'm tired. It sounded like a recording being played back through a shitty speaker, but it was me. I didn't stay to investigate. I ran back inside, slammed the door, and bolted everything. I stayed up all night with the lights on, Silas pressed against my legs. He was shaking, a 90-pound dog, vibrating like a leaf. By the third day, I was convinced I was having some kind of breakdown. I even called my sister and asked if she thought I sounded off. She said I sounded stressed, but fine. I didn't tell her about the voice. I didn't want her to call the hospital. I decided to stay inside. No hike, no porch time. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of something tapping on the glass. Tink, tink, tink. It was rhythmic, just like the stones in the woods. I looked at the baby monitor I'd set up in the living room. I'd moved a camera to face the front door. The screen was grainy, but I could see the porch. The man was back, but he wasn't wearing the yellow coat anymore. He was wearing my clothes. Not like my clothes, my actual clothes. He was wearing the red flannel shirt I'd left on the porch chair the day before, and my old muddy work boots. He was standing with his back to the camera, just like before. But his head, it was tilting back and forth, like he was trying to figure out how a neck worked. I picked up my phone to call 911, but there was no signal, just a low, vibrating hum coming through the earpiece, a hum that felt like it was vibrating in my teeth. I looked back at the monitor. The man slowly started to turn around. I stopped breathing. I was waiting for a monster or a distorted face or something out of a horror movie. But it wasn't. It was just a face, a completely blank, smooth surface of skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a pale, fleshy mask where a face should be. Except as I watched the screen, a slit started to open near the bottom, like a wound. And from that slit, it spoke. Honestly, it said, "Look, I'm not even kidding." It was using the fillers I use. It was mimicking my nervous habits. I backed into the corner of my bedroom, clutching the pistol. I could hear Silas whimpering in the kitchen. Then I heard the sound of the front door handle turning. Click, click, click. The deadbolt held for a second. Then I heard the sound of something hitting the side of the house, hard, like a wrecking ball. The whole place shook. Pictures fell off the walls. Silas started howling, this high-pitched, terrified sound I'd never heard an animal make. I looked at the monitor again. The porch was empty, but there was something new on the screen. The camera was pointed at the door, but in the reflection of the glass, I could see my own bedroom door behind me. The handle was turning. I'm not a brave person. I'm really not. I fired a shot through the door. The sound was deafening in the small room. I heard a heavy thud on the other side. I waited. For an hour, I didn't move. Silas had stopped howling and was just whining at the kitchen door. Finally, I got the courage to open the bedroom door. There was no body. There was no blood. There was just a pile of wet river stones on the carpet, and my red flannel shirt neatly folded on top of them. I packed a bag and left. I didn't even grab my laptop. I just grabbed Silas and my keys and drove. I didn't stop until I hit a gas station in a well-lit area near the interstate. I stayed in a motel for 3 days. I finally worked up the nerve to go back with a friend of mine, a guy who used to be in the Rangers. He had his rifle, I had mine. The house was fine. Nothing was stolen, no broken windows, but when I went into the kitchen, I saw something that made me vomit. On the refrigerator, I have those little magnetic letters, for kids or for leaving notes. I hadn't touched them in months. They were rearranged. Still in the trees, it said. And underneath that, nice shot. I didn't stay. I didn't even pack the fridge. I just grabbed Silas, threw my tactical bag in the back of the truck, and peeled out of that gravel driveway so fast I fishtailed. My friend, the ranger, he didn't even make fun of me. He saw the look on my face and just followed me out in his own rig. But here's the thing about living in the mountains. You can leave the house, but you're still in the woods. I checked into this roadside motel, one of those places with the exterior doors and the smell of stale cigarettes and industrial bleach. I figured, okay, more people, more lights, I'm safe. Silas wouldn't stop pacing, though. He kept going to the door, sniffing the crack at the bottom, and then backing away with his tail tucked so far between his legs it was touching his stomach. I'm sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of the nice shot message. My brain was trying to find a circuit breaker, something to shut down the fear so I could think. Maybe it was a stalker. Some local freak who'd been watching me for months, recording my voice, stealing my laundry. But that doesn't explain the high stepping, or the face, that blank, smooth skin. I fell asleep around 4 a.m. just out of sheer exhaustion. I woke up because Silas was gone. Not gone from the room. The door was still bolted and the chain was on. But he wasn't on the floor. I looked around, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Silas," I whispered. I heard a thud. It came from under the bed. I dropped to my knees and looked. He was squeezed into the far corner against the wall, his massive body trembling so hard the bed frame was rattling. He looked at me, and his eyes were almost entirely white. He'd rolled them back in his head. Then I heard it, from the bathroom. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of the river stones. I grabbed my pistol from the nightstand. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I walked toward the bathroom door. It was cracked open just an inch. The light was off, but the moon was coming through the tiny frosted window over the shower. I pushed the door open. The bathtub was full. Not with water, it was filled to the brim with those same gray, smooth river stones, Hundreds of them. They were piled up in a mound, and sitting right on top of the pile was my cell phone. The screen lit up. A notification. I reached out, my breath coming in these short, jagged hitches. I picked up the phone. It was a voice memo, recorded 2 minutes ago. I hit play. It was the sound of me sleeping, my own heavy breathing, the whistle in my nose I get when I have allergies. And then a second voice, my voice, but lower. "He's awake now," the recording said. I looked up at the bathroom mirror. In the darkness, I could see my own reflection, but behind me, in the reflection of the hallway, the man in the yellow slicker was standing in the middle of the motel room. I spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. Just Silas whimpering under the bed and the humming of the old AC unit. I turned back to the mirror. He was still there in the reflection. He was standing right over the spot where Silas was hiding, and he was holding a pair of heavy shears. My shears, from my kitchen junk drawer. I didn't think. I just bolted. I grabbed Silas by the collar, dragged him out from under the bed. He was dead weight. I practically had to hoist him, and I ran for the truck. I didn't even check out. I just drove. I drove for 3 hours. I ended up in a 24-hour diner near the Tennessee border. I sat in a booth, Silas in the truck with the windows cracked, and I just drank black coffee until my stomach felt like it was full of battery acid. I started scrolling through my phone, looking at the photos I'd taken of the woods over the last few months. Just mundane stuff. Fall colors, Silas running, the old chimney. I found a photo from 3 weeks ago. It was a selfie. I'm smiling, looking like a total dork, with the trail behind me. I zoomed in. Way back in the brush, maybe 30 yards behind me, there's a shape. It's barely visible. It looks like a tall, thin tree trunk at first, but when you look closer, you can see the yellow, just a sliver of it. He'd been there for weeks. I stayed in that diner until the sun came up. I felt a little better when the world turned gray and then gold. The daylight version of me started to take over. I told myself I was overreacting. The stones, a prank. The reflection, sleep deprivation. The voice, a recording. I decided I couldn't live like a fugitive. I had to go back and get my stuff, my real documents, my computer, my life. I called my friend again, but he didn't pick up. I left a message. Going back to grab the essentials. Meet me there if you can. I got back to the house around noon. The woods were loud again. Birds, insects, the wind in the pines. It felt normal, almost mocking. I walked inside. The house was cold. I went straight to the bedroom to grab my safe. I stopped in the doorway. The bed was made. I hadn't made the bed in 3 days. It was tucked in tight, hospital corners, perfectly flat. And laying on the pillow was a single, wet, copper penny. I felt that vibration again. Not a sound, but a feeling in my marrow, like a low-frequency hum that makes your skin crawl. I turned to leave, but the front door slammed shut. I ran to it, grabbing the handle. It wouldn't budge. Not because it was locked. The handle wouldn't even turn. It felt like it was part of the frame, like the whole house had suddenly become one solid piece of wood. I went to the window. I tried to smash it with the butt of my gun. The glass didn't break. It felt like hitting a truck tire. The gun just bounced off, sending a shockwave up my arm that numbed my elbow. I looked out the window. The trees were moving, not swaying in the wind. They were shifting. The gaps between the oaks were closing. It was like the forest was a set of curtains being pulled shut. And then I saw him. He was standing on the lawn, but he wasn't wearing the yellow slicker anymore. He wasn't wearing my flannel. He was wearing my skin. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't like a mask. It was me. My face, my hair, the mole on my neck. But it was stretched. His neck was too long, his shoulders too narrow. He looked like a reflection in a funhouse mirror that had been pulled at the corners. He walked toward the window, that same high-stepping, rhythmic march. Clack, clack, clack. Except the sound wasn't coming from stones anymore. It was coming from his jaw. He was hitting his teeth together. He stopped right in front of the glass. He was inches away. I could see the pores in the skin. I could see the slight tremor in my eyelid. He raised a hand with fingers that had one too many joints, and he pressed it against the glass. "Honestly," he whispered. The voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from the walls of the house. "Look, I'm not even kidding." He started to laugh, but it wasn't a laugh. It was the sound of a bobcat screaming, that horrific woman in distress wail, echoing through the rafters of my own home. I backed away, tripping over the coffee table. I scrambled into the kitchen, looking for the back door. The back door was gone. There was just a solid wall of siding where the door used to be. No frame, no handle, just drywall and paint. I looked at the refrigerator. The letters were moving. They were sliding across the door on their own, clicking like insects. W-H-E-R-A-R-U, going. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was cold, so cold it felt like a burn. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I was paralyzed. My muscles felt like they'd been turned to lead. "I like this routine," the voice said, right in my ear. It was my voice, but it was wet, like there was blood in the throat. "Same trail, every day at 4 p.m. I managed to find my voice, though it sounded like a whimper. "What are you?" The pressure on my shoulder increased. I heard the sound of a bone snapping, my collarbone. The pain was white-hot, blinding. I dropped to my knees, screaming. The thing stepped around me. It crouched down so we were eye to eye. Up close, I could see the glitch. The skin around the eyes was vibrating, blurring like a corrupted video file. It didn't have pupils, just two holes that looked like they went back forever. It reached out and touched my cheek with a long, spindly finger. "I'm the version that stays," it said. Then it stood up and walked toward the living room. It sat down in my favorite chair. It picked up a book I'd been reading and started flipping the pages. I lay there on the kitchen floor, clutching my shoulder, watching this thing pretend to be me. I realized then that the house wasn't a house anymore. It was a cage, and the woods, they weren't just trees, they were a wall. I looked at the clock on the stove. 3:58 p.m. The thing in the chair looked at me and pointed to the wall where the back door used to be. Slowly, the drywall started to peel back, not like it was being torn, but like it was dissolving. The woods were right there, the trail, the dry creek bed. "Time for our walk," it said. It stood up and started walking toward the opening. It didn't look back. It just expected me to follow. I looked at Silas. He was sitting by the opening, tail wagging. He wasn't scared anymore. He looked at the thing in my clothes. Then he looked at me, and he growled, a deep, territorial growl. He didn't recognize me. The thing stepped out into the leaves. Clack, clack, clack. I got to my feet, holding my arm. I had no choice. If I stayed in the house, I was pretty sure the walls would just close in until there was no air left. I stepped out onto the dirt. The air was thick with the smell of wet copper. We started walking. We passed the old chimney. We passed the pine tree where the yellow coat had been, except now there were dozens of them, bright yellow slickers hanging from every branch, swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. As we walked, I noticed the glitches were getting worse. The trees would flicker. For a split second, they'd look like giant reaching fingers, then snap back to oaks. The ground would feel solid, then soft as moss, then hard as concrete. The thing, the other me, stopped near the creek bed. It turned around. "Do you know why I picked you?" it asked. I couldn't speak. I was just trying not to pass out from the pain in my shoulder. "Because you're so consistent," it said. "You do the same thing every day. You make it so easy to learn the shape of a life." It stepped closer. It was taller now, much taller. Its head was almost level with the lower branches of the trees. "But I'm bored of the walk," it whispered. It reached up and grabbed its own face. It started to pull. I heard the sound of wet Velcro tearing. The skin, my face, began to peel away. Underneath, there wasn't a skull, there wasn't blood, there was just light. A blinding, pulsing, rhythmic light that matched the clack, clack, clack sound. I felt my own face start to itch. I reached up with my good hand. My skin felt loose, like it wasn't attached to the muscle anymore. I could feel it sliding, shifting. "No," I gasped. "Don't worry," the thing said, its voice now a chorus of 1,000 voices, all of them mine from every age I'd ever been. "I'll keep the routine." It lunged at me. I didn't run. I couldn't. I just closed my eyes and waited for the end. But it didn't kill me. I felt a rush of cold air, a sensation of falling, and then silence. I opened my eyes. I was standing in my kitchen. My shoulder didn't hurt. I reached up. It was solid, no break. I looked at the clock. 4:02 p.m. "Silas?" I called out. No answer. I ran to the window. Out on the lawn, I saw them. I saw myself. I was wearing my red flannel. I was walking Silas toward the woods. I looked happy. I was tossing a stick for him. I tried to yell, to scream, to warn whatever that was out there, but no sound came out. I looked down at my hands. They were gray, the color of river stones. I tried to move, but I was heavy, so heavy. I felt my feet sinking into the floorboards, not breaking through them, but merging with them. I looked in the mirror over the sink. I didn't have a face. I was a smooth, pale blank. I'm still here, I'm writing this, or I think I am, on the laptop that's been sitting on the table for weeks or days. Time doesn't work the same way when you're part of the house. I can see him out there, the other me. He's living my life. He's talking to my sister on the phone. He's doing my data entry. And every day at 4 p.m., he goes for a walk. But lately, he's been stopping. He stops at the edge of the woods and he looks back at the house. He looks right at this window and he starts hitting 2 stones together. Clack, clack, clack. He's waiting. He's waiting for me to come out. I think he's hungry. And I'm starting to realize that the yellow coats in the trees, they aren't warnings, they're trophies. I didn't think it could get worse than being a ghost in my own kitchen, but then the sun went down. When the light fades in those mountains, it doesn't just get dark. It's like the world ceases to exist beyond the reach of your own hand. And then the power went out. No flicker, no surge, just a sudden, violent snap into a void. The humming of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, the digital glow of the oven, all of it died. In that silence, the smell of wet copper came back, but it was thick now. It smelled like a slaughterhouse floor. I was standing by the sink, or what I thought was the sink, but my hands didn't feel like hands. They felt like cold, wet clay. I tried to scream, but my throat was just a solid mass of tissue. And then I heard it, a heavy, dragging sound coming from the garage. Skirt, skirt. Like something heavy and metallic being pulled across the concrete. I don't know how, but I moved. It wasn't walking. It was like the house was sliding me toward the sound. I reached the door to the garage, the one place I hadn't checked since I got back. My hands fumbled with the knob. It felt like trying to turn a door handle with oven mitts made of lead. The door creaked open. The garage was filled with a low, pulsing gray light. It wasn't coming from a lamp. It was coming from the floor. I looked down. My truck was gone. In its place, the concrete had been ripped up, and the hole was filled with thousands, maybe tens of thousands of those gray river stones. They were vibrating. They were humming at a frequency that made my teeth feel like they were going to shatter in my gums. And sitting in the middle of the stones was the man in the yellow slicker. But he was inside out. I don't even know how to describe the physics of it. It was like someone had taken a human shape and folded it through a dimension that shouldn't exist. There was no blood, just that pulsing rhythmic light. And he was holding something. It was Silas. My dog wasn't dead, but he wasn't Silas anymore. He was being unmade. The thing was running its long, multi-jointed fingers over Silas's fur, and everywhere it touched, the fur turned into gray stone. Silas's eyes were wide, fixed on me, pleading. He made a sound, not a bark, but a clack. That was the moment. That was the moment the circuit breaker in my head finally flipped. I didn't care about the skin-crawling fear anymore. I didn't care that I didn't have a face. Something in the lizard brain part of me just snapped. I lunged. I didn't have a weapon, so I just threw the weight of my gray, heavy body at the thing. We hit the pile of stones, and the world exploded into a static-filled nightmare. I felt its fingers sink into my chest. It didn't hurt. It felt like ice water being injected into my veins. I grabbed the yellow slicker. It felt like cold, wet plastic, and I pulled. I pulled with everything I had left of my humanity. The glitch became deafening. The sound of 1,000 bobcats screaming. The sound of my sister's voice. The sound of my own voice saying, "Nice shot," over and over again. And then I felt a hand on my collar. A real hand. Hey, wake up. Man, breathe. I bolted upright. I wasn't in the garage. I wasn't a gray statue. I was in the passenger seat of my friend's truck. We were parked at a gas station. The sun was hitting the windshield, and it was blindingly bright. My chest was heaving, and I was covered in a cold, oily sweat. "You were having a seizure or something, man," my friend said. He looked terrified. "You just went rigid and started making this clicking sound with your teeth. I had to pull over." I looked at my hands. They were shaking, but they were skin. My skin. "Where's Silas?" I gasped. My friend looked at me, his expression softening into something like pity. "Dude, Silas died 3 years ago. Don't you remember? The cancer?" The world tilted. I felt the bile rise in my throat. "No," I whispered. He was at the house. He was with me. The yellow coat. The stones." My friend shook his head. "Look, I think the stress of the move, the isolation, it's getting to you. You called me screaming about a guy in a raincoat, but when I got to your place, you were just standing in the middle of the woods staring at a pile of rocks. You wouldn't even look at me. I had to practically drag you into the truck." I didn't say anything for the rest of the drive. I couldn't. He dropped me off at a hotel in Asheville. I've been here for 2 weeks. I haven't gone back. I told the landlord to keep the deposit and just burn everything in the house. I don't want the clothes. I don't want the furniture. But here's why I'm recording this. Why I can't just move on and call it a breakdown. 3 days ago, I got a package at the hotel front desk. No return address. Inside was a yellow rain slicker, brand new, and tucked into the pocket was a single wet copper penny.
I've started noticing things in the hotel. Small things. The way the maid says, "Have a nice day." She uses the exact same inflection I used when I said it to her yesterday. Not similar, exact. And last night, I went to the bathroom to wash my face. I looked in the mirror. For a split second, just a heartbeat, my reflection didn't move when I did. It stayed still, leaning over the sink, staring at me with eyes that looked like 2 empty holes. Then it smiled. And it wasn't a human smile. It was too wide, too many teeth. I'm leaving the hotel tonight. I'm going to drive until I hit the coast. Maybe the salt air or the open horizon will change something. Maybe it can't follow me if there aren't any trees. But sometimes, when it's really quiet, I can hear it in the walls of the car or in the vibration of the road beneath the tires. Clack, clack, clack. I think I'm still in the woods. I think I never left the house. Honestly, look, I'm not even kidding. I think the me that's driving this car is the one who learned the shape of a life. And the real me, the one who remembers Silas, I think I'm still under that pile of stones in the garage, waiting for my turn to walk.